All right, so planting lettuce with Paperpot Transplanter. There's like 3 different types of lettuce I plant, right? And that's gonna be head lettuce, which I'm gonna do 8 inches apart, um, 4 rows on a bed. I can also do that 8 inches apart or 12 inches apart, 3 rows on a bed if I want bigger lettuces, especially ones that are gonna grow big and round. And by doing 12 inches, you just take a 6-inch paper pot and do every other one. Then there's cut and come again lettuce, Salanova, which you can do 4 rows on a bed, 8 inches apart or 6 inches apart. Both of those work really, really well. And that's where you're just cutting it for the mix. And then lastly is going to be baby lettuce, which is a very different crop. That's where you're using a mix of different lettuces. You use maybe a 2-inch paper pot, and then I do 6 rows on a bed or 8 rows on a bed. And that's where you're just cutting the mix and it's all baby lettuce. And restaurants really love that. It used to be a much bigger thing until Salanova came around, but it's great to have in the winter, great for restaurant clients, and certainly works with Paperpot Transplanter. So for the baby lettuce 2-inch pots, anywhere from 6 to 8 rows on a bed. Then we have Salanova as a mix, where we're going to do 4 rows on a bed, and that'll either be 6 to 8 inches apart with the paper pot. Then you have head lettuce, which will be 8 inches apart, 4 rows on a bed, up to 3 rows to 12 inches apart to get a nice lettuce head. There's really no difference in how we're going to transplant it using the transplanter. You're going to want to make sure your depth is right. You want to make sure your fingers are right. What do I mean by that? And what I mean by that is you want the lettuce to be well inside that trench, right? If you think of your flatbed like this and you have your trench, right? You want that top of that paper pot to be up by the edge of the trench, right? Because if it's too shallow, it's going to dry out and it's going to die. And that's not good. But you also don't want it too deep, right, where it's getting buried. But I do have answers for both of those, and I'm going to tell you them right now. If that happens, right, and you get it too deep, what works really well is a broom, a cheap $2 broom, and then you can just sweep the dirt off of your seedlings. It works really, really well. Now, if you do it so that it's not deep enough, right, where you see the paper pot, then you can easily just use a tool like this called the zipper, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to bring, you see, it works really well to make sure you're buried, right? Because sometimes what happens is you get to the end of a row, you lift up the transplanter, and some aren't buried, right? And this thing will just help you with that, right? So there's not a loss. You don't have to worry about it. You can fix it, right? This is if it's not buried enough, and a broom if it's buried too much. But if you have it dialed in, if you're using a really nice transplanter, then it's going to look just like this when you're done, which is perfect depth, right? And you just play with it. But once you get it right on your depth, if your soil is pretty much the same across your farm, you probably won't have to change it very much. I rarely change it. And that's going to be, more moisture conditions if the soil's pretty wet or if it's pretty dry. But sometimes that, is really about the front, right? So you want to play around with your fingers. If you have very sandy soil, you can just take them off sometimes and just use the wheels. And that's going to work really, really nicely. So experiment with them or without them. But you can also bend, make it have less or more, because what it's doing is the fingers are just filling the trench and then the wheels are just tamping it down. So just play around with those before maybe you start checking the depth, okay? One pointer is you're always better off, I think, to have it just slightly deep, because, when those fingers are bringing it in, it's actually piling it up a little bit. And the first time that you water it, that soil is going to be settled, and you don't want all the paper pots exposed. So, it's always slightly deeper than you think it is. Hey, thanks for watching. And if you have any videos or information about Paperpot planting, your experience with it, you have some suggestions, tips, tricks, send them in to us. And we'd love to publish them here at paperpot.com. Just hit the contact button down below and let us know.